So, if you ever wonder why our Congress doesn't seem to be completely in touch, it's because when they get people who know things, they don't ask them intelligent questions, or they don't ask them pertinent questions about what actually is going on and what things are like going forward. Instead, they try and cash in on political points. Here are two senators, Warren and Scott, who don't seem to get the whole thing, and instead are just doing political crap.
Now, President Trump has called Dodd-Frank a, quote, disaster, and he has vowed to, quote, dismantle it. He started down that road 2 weeks ago when he issued an executive order on financial regulation, and he's put two men, Steve Mnuchin and Gary Cohn, who have spent a combined 42 years at Goldman Sachs, in charge of rewriting the rules to help big banks like Goldman. Chair Yellen, I know you and the Fed spend an enormous amount of time looking at actual data about the economy and financial markets. So I want to follow up on Senator Brown's questions and get your take on some of the administration's main reasons for calling Dodd-Frank a disaster. When he unveiled his executive order, President Trump said he hoped to, quote, cut a lot out of Dodd-Frank, close quote, because, quote, friends of mine that have nice businesses can't borrow money. Now, I'm aware of the small business survey that you cited earlier, but I want to look at the bigger range of data. What do the data show about business lending since Dodd-Frank was enacted in 2010?
Now that question was longer than it needed to be, and she drew it out in order to kind of put Trump in the crossfires. But, I wonder, is it possible this data is probably in front of her? Absolutely it is. She knows very well that business lending is up since 2010 and actually 2008. So why would she ask this question? And where would Trump be getting these numbers from? Well, maybe Trump's going by the same data she is, the 50% of respondents who said they didn't get all the money they wanted. Or perhaps they were talking about the fact that they're not getting loans for what they want. The vast majority of durable good orders have been flat for the last 8 years, which means companies aren't investing in their people. They're not investing in new equipment. They're not investing in new plants. Or perhaps it's the fact that they're approving loans for stock buybacks, which is the number one loan thing that the banks are giving out money for. They give money to companies and then buy back stocks. Well, did she ask any of this? No, she just asked for a general number. Well, what does these numbers mean? It doesn't mean how much money is being lent out is a good thing or a bad thing. What the money is being used for is the thing that she needs to be asking about. But she didn't. She asked, well, what's the total? See, political, nothing about the economy, and if something happens, we're blindsided yet again.
So thank you very much. Very impressive. So the data do not back the president up here. Another claim.
Oddly enough, no. You did not prove that point. You just put that in. She didn't say that.
President Trump's economic advisor, Gary Cohn, is that banks have been forced to hoard capital and, quote, have been forced to literally build capital and build capital instead of lending capital to their clients. Now, Chair Yellen, when regulators impose a capital requirement on a bank, does that requirement prevent the bank from lending out that capital? Or in other words, is a capital requirement a reserve requirement? Can banks do whatever they want with that capital, including lending it?
Now, I don't know what this guy said. Maybe it was stupid. But he's actually right. What Warren just asked him is like, can you give me a fundamental reason why banking? Of course Dodd-Frank increased the capital requirements. That's why the banks failed in 2008. They didn't have enough capital to cover their losses. It increased it. And Yellen explains, well, they need to have some kind of capital. They can't finance loans with debt. So if they get money in and they have the capital, they can loan the money out and just use collateral or whatnot. It's a stupid question. And in fact, his comment was actually dumber. He wants to free up more capital so banks can leverage more. Leverage it on debt, kind of like it was. That's how it should have been attacked. Not, well, he's just wrong. Geez, you're just trying to do political points, not actually make a point or figure out what's going on. You need to ask about things that are going on. The Fed makes a lot of policy. You need to ask about that policy, what she's doing here, what she's doing there. Where are the signs? Where are the troubles? What does she need from Congress? Not, can you agree with me that Trump is bad?
look at another statement by Mr. Cohn. He said, we have the best, most highly capitalized banks in the world, and we should use that to our competitive advantage. But on the flip side, we also have the most highly regulated, overburdened banks in the world. That sounds an awful lot like a contradiction to me. Either our banks have a competitive advantage because the world knows that we carefully regulate our banks, or our banks have a competitive disadvantage because of those requirements. So, Chair Yellen, which one is it? How have our banks done in comparison to their foreign competitors since we put our new rules in place?
This question is just political stupidity, and she knows it's political stupidity. Dodd-Frank did not occur in a vacuum. If only thing that the United States had done in 2010 till now was Dodd-Frank, well, maybe you could draw something. But there were a couple other events which might have occurred. I don't know, maybe QE, $4.5 trillion dumped in the economy. Maybe that had something to do with the financial banks. We were one of the first countries to do QE on such a massive scale. And it really helped out the banks because they were able to unload a lot of stuff and get a lot of free capital. How about the fact that we had 0% interest rates? I wonder if that had anything to play with it as well. Again, Dodd-Frank didn't just occur in a vacuum. And you know this. You've been on this committee for a long time. And you don't ask pertinent questions. You put no input in beforehand, so then you criticize when she makes a decision afterhand. You might not like what she did or what the Fed did about the big banks or whatnot, but you didn't see it coming. You weren't asking questions. This is the prime reason why. You're not asking about future things. You're asking about things that happened in the past, and you're not even asking good questions in the first place. This is the problem. Jeez.
Taking away clients from other banks. In fact, our banks have thrived since we passed Dodd-Frank. Both big banks and community banks are making literally record profits. Mr. Chairman, I would like to submit for the record the most recent quarterly report.
Honestly, I don't know what to think here. She goes on to praise the big banks. She praises them. Hey, look how profitable they are. They're great. I love these big banks. She actually talks about it. Not to talk about how they get access to deals from the government that nobody else could. They can make tons of money just by taking money from the government at near zero interest rate and then buying bonds from the government at 2%. Geez, it's going to be easy for them to be profitable. I don't understand it. This was pointless. Again, it's just a monologue to try and bash Trump. And I don't care if you bash Trump, but this meeting is supposed to be informative. You're supposed to get answers. You're supposed to learn something. You're supposed to grill her. Not, hey, come to Team Democrat.
Want to scrap the rules so they can go back to the good old days when bankers could take huge risks and get huge bonuses if they got lucky, knowing that they could get taxpayer bailouts if their bets didn't pay off. We did this kind of regulation before, and it resulted in the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. We cannot afford to go down this road again. Thank you, Chair Yellen.
But let's go to the Republican.
Thank you, Chair Yellen, for being here this morning. I guess about a month ago, you had a teacher town hall meeting with post-secondary economic educators, and you had a question about Dodd-Frank as it relates to repealing it or changing it, and part of your answer was community banks feel the burden of regulation is very great. And I really feel strongly that we should be looking for ways to mitigate regulatory burden. And we are looking for ways, particularly for smaller institutions, to mitigate that burden. There could be modifications to Dodd-Frank that could succeed in reducing regulatory burden for smaller institutions, to quote you. I would love to hear your thoughts and your recommendations on ways to mitigate that regulatory burden for small banks, specifically small banks in places like South Carolina and other states.
Oddly enough, this wasn't that bad a question. He asked about Dodd-Frank and kind of a general thing of comments that she made about lightening it up. Her response will be, well, basically they treat big banks like small banks, and that small banks are getting crushed under the regulation because they don't have the regulatory personnel dedicated to just them. Smaller people have trouble getting the capital requirements that large institutions would easily have. It's an easy example to make. If I already have $1 million, well, it's easier for me to go get a loan if my money's all tied up. If I'm a person just starting out, I don't have a lot of money, so I don't have the capital requirements in order to get the same loan. And she talks blah, 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 blah. It was worth it that he said, like, I hope to see that in writing. Yeah, me too. I doubt I ever will, though.
For banks that are well managed and low risk. So those are some of the things we're doing. We are attempting through our GRIPR review with the other banking regulators to identify provisions that can reduce burden. We've put out provisions that reduce the amount of information that we require on our call reports.
Thank you.
And many other things.
Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing some of that in writing so that we can fuse it all together.
Then he asks a question about African American employment. Again, a question that the Fed chairman really can't influence, she really can't do anything about, and her opinion is just wishy-washy at best, and she can't affect any of the programs, any of the policies. This is stuff the government should do. Why are you bothering? It's a waste of time. Oh, God, just the wishy-washy stuff of the Republicans. I guess in final, people have to understand that she doesn't do this too often. She doesn't answer to Congress. She may talk to the president more often, but she doesn't talk to Congress. And this is one of the few open-air meetings that we get a chance to talk to her. You need to hit her with questions. How about the fact that they promised 4 rate hikes last year and we only got 1? Why wasn't there 3 others? What was detrimental in the economy? Ask her that, because obviously there are problems. She promised 3 this year. We haven't gotten any, and we're going into March. Doesn't seem like we're going to get 3. What is she looking at? Where are the problems that she expects to see of having interest rates so low? Where are these issues? Where are they watching to make sure that there's more damage? Where are the areas of concern? No, there's so much that she should be asked that nobody's asking. Talk about the federal debt. Talk about so many different things. Their balance sheet was supposed to be shrinking by now. The Federal Reserve balance sheet was supposed to be shrinking by now. But it's not. It's growing. She's changed her policy several times in the last year, and those questions were not asked. That's why we're flying blind. We have regulators who are making all our decisions. Well, thanks for watching The Insanity.